Welcome back for part 3 of the video series Learn to Build Mobile Apps with Ionic Framework, VueJS, and Capacitor, where we're focusing on integrating Google Maps into your application. We've covered adding markers, rendering the map, adding info box to markers, and in this one we are going to show you how to use a geocoder service to type an address and find the location, add that location to the map with a marker, and then we're going to show you how to add the code to automatically adjust the map bounds based on the markers. So basically making sure that every marker on the map is visible. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this series so far. Please make sure you like and subscribe. Also share it with your friends. I have a lot of great content here. Hoping you're enjoying it all. And let's get to the code. Okay, picking up where we left off, we're going to start off first by adding a callback so that in the parent container, you can know when the map is finished loading. So if there's some other action you want to take, like remove a loading screen or something like that, we're gonna add a event that gets triggered, or actually not a really event, it's a callback, so that the map will call this function when it's done loading. So at our top level here, we're going to add this function. We're going to call it handle map did load, and for now, we're just going to log out some information in the console so that you know when it did load. And then we're going to go up to our Google Map component that we've created. We are going to bind another function to it, and that function that we're binding to it is called map_did_load. And so what will happen is that's a new property that's been added, and then we're going to go into our Google Map component, and we're in the window initialize function. And after that's called and the map is created and we load the markers, we're going to check to see if there is a property called map_did_load. Basically, if you assigned a value to that. And if you did, we're going to call that function. But what we're also going to do is we're going to pass back the map and the Google library that was loaded. And that Google library is Windows Google Maps. And so what you'll see inside of that, which I'll show in the debugger, is that all of the map services that you have subscribed to, you have access to through this window Google Maps. And as stated in the header, we're going to use that to get access to the geocoder service and reverse geocode addresses. So here we're adding the property map_did_load. It's just a function, so the type's defined to it. And that should be enough for us to try it out and see if this guy's working. So let's make sure we add the parameters that are getting passed back. Once again, I'm not using TypeScript on this side, so you're just going to have to trust me on the services that are coming back. I'll include in the section below the links to the Google services that I'm using. And then also when I show you some stuff in the debugger, you'll see how all the services are coming back, how we're actually getting a map back and we're getting the set of services. So we're just going to log that we got the callback, we're going to log the map that we got passed, and we're going to log the Google services that got passed back to us. As I said, I'm just using a geocoder service just to give you a demonstration, but basically any service that you have subscribed to with this API key you can get access to and utilize. Okay, it looks like we have everything set up now. Let's fire this guy up, open up our debug tools, and we can see down here that we've been called back, and there's the map. Since it's a reference, we have to look in the value to actually see the value of the map. And there's the Google map that has been rendered. So you can get everything you need there. And then the next variable that was handed back is gservices. And you can see the gservices object is there. Those are all the services that potentially you might have access to. We're going to focus on a geocoder service because I know I've set that up for this account. So now that let's do some cleanup here to get rid of these errors because the errors are annoying. So we've cleaned up that error, we have our map going, and now let's get to utilizing this service that we passed back. So we're going to create a local variable, local variable called geocoder service. We're going to instantiate that service. That service is called geocoder. We're going to instantiate that service, and we're going to assign it to our local variable. So now let's add that variable to the top. Let's give it an initial value. What's it complaining about? Yeah, all right, I'm going to use it below. Be patient. And here it's saying it's a constant, so it can't be null. So let's remove the constant and set this back to a let. Okay, assigned a value but never used. Let's go down. It's assigned a value but never used. So let's create the function that's going to use it to make this error go away. So we're going to call our function find location. We don't need to pass any parameters. We're going to use the local variable that we're going to create, which will hold the string that the user types in an input box, and that string is what we're going to use to call the service to find it. Add a little comment so we know what's going on. It finds the LatLng information based on the address. There's a bunch of other information that comes back. We're really just going to use the LatLng and the what they're calling the formatted address to add the info box to the item when it's placed on the map. So let's utilize our geocoder service. Once again, I'll include the link below, but trust me, the way you use it, you have the geocoder service, you call the function geocode, you pass it an object with a key called address, and in that address is going to be the string that Google's going to use and try to do a reverse geolocation on it. If successful, well, not if successful, the callback, the callback that you get is an result and a status string, and if the status string is okay, then you have gotten a successful result back. If it is not okay, then you got an error. We're not really going to handle an error situation. All we're going to do is say, if I did not get okay, we're just going to display an alert saying some sort of error occurred. You can do whatever you like with it, but we're just trying to keep it simple here. Well, I got to define my location. Since we're binding it to an input box, we're going to create a reference with it. And we know that the type is a string, so I can set the type here, and we're going to set it as an empty string. All right, now let's figure what's the error here. Okay, it needs us to be doing something. So what we're going to say is, if my status does not equal okay, then we're going to alert no result. And then otherwise, we're going to try to process the values that we get back. So as I stated before, the result is an array of objects. We're going to assume that we're only going to use the first one since it's a zero-based array. The value that we're going to work with is 0. Our results at 0. But let's clean up some of these errors here and set up the input box first. So we're going to use some Ionic components here to create a nice text box inside of an item and kind of wrap everything nice and neatly. So we created our text box, we created a placeholder, we're going to bind our model to it, our location value that we created. Where are we? Let's make sure we return it so we can get access to it in the template. Everything good. Okay, let's kind of clean up this UI a little bit. So let's straighten this out. Let's wrap another div around that to give me some proper padding. And so now we have our Ion item. And then underneath our item, we have some padding around the button. So it's not sitting on top of each other like it is right now. And, that looks good. But as usual, let's make sure we add the Ionic components. We didn't add our Ionic input. So let's add our Ionic input component. And it's saying it's added, but it's not used. What's going on? Let's look. Oh, it appears that I have Ion item, and I thought my item was my input. So let's correct this. We already have the item object. Let's add the input object. Okay, and then let's take all of the attributes that I had in the item and put them on the input where they really belong. So we don't need that except. Let's get that paste work, cut and paste mojo. There we go. Now it's in. Now we have our input with our placeholder. We have our button, which should call the location. We have the find location function set. We have our padding. UI looks okay. Let's add a little bit more padding between the map and there you go. Everything's moved down a little bit better. All right. Now let's give our function a go. See what we get. So Paris, France. Let's open up our trusty debug tools and see what values we have stored in there. We're getting an error. I did not import. Well, as you can see, we are getting a result. So we're getting the formatted address back, Paris, France. And if you look in the geometry object and a location object, you can see we're getting the LatLng that we were looking for, and we're going to use those variables to give us some nice information to display, and then also to create the marker. But let's get back and address this Ion item import issue. But let's first handle the input and the UI stuff since we're already here. So let's create an Ion item, and inside of that Ion item, we will create an Ion text field. Let's put some padding on this first so that we have some spacing. We're going to create an Ion text field. And I think in a text field, we're going to try and display for the user what Google gave us back. So we have some way to see the information that Google provided that'll be visibly presented. What you might want to do is just replace what is appearing in the input form to show the actual information, but we're going to create a separate field that will show the actual location position. And in this situation, the position is LatLng. And then we're also going to display the text string that is provided back to us in formatted address. So loc position and loc address. We're not going to really clean this up too much. Let's just format it, get it set, and go. Looks like I did not define loc, so let's put something for locs so it makes sense. Well, first let's fix my Ion item error. So let's add the item component and the Ion text component. Add those components. Let's go up and make sure we add them to our imports. So added, recompiled. Now it's complaining about our loc and our position, so let's fix those. We have our location string, which is our input. Let's put some comments on. So we have our service, which describes what our geo service is. We have our location, which is the input. And now let's add our initial, well, those are our initial markers. Now let's add our position variable. And loc seems kind of wrong, so let's add loc result. Probably should say location result, but let's be judicious with our use of characters. So we're just going to put loc result. And then now let's put a comment here so that we know what loc result is. Loc result is the information that got returned to us from Google. So, and it's a ref. We want it to be, I don't know if it needed to be a ref, but we're going to make it a ref. I'm just getting ref crazy. So we have our loc result. And now let's set it. So we have our results that come back. We have to use our value because it's a ref. As I said, remember everything is a result, so we're going to pull our position off and our address. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're only displaying that area if I actually got a value back. So let's put an if on there. Let's make sure we return it at the bottom. And I've put my conditional around the wrong thing, so let's change that. Let's put our condition around the Ion item, not around the Ion text. Don't want anything to show. A little petty, but let's just be thorough since we're here. Okay. Everything looks good, no errors. Let's try searching for something. Let's try Paris, France again. We got an error. So geometry get lat is clearly not a function. So I saved you guys the pain, but basically what I found out is that I should just be doing a geometry.location to JSON, and that will give me the LatLng in the format that I want. So I can just change this whole thing for the position to just say result 0 geometry LatLng, and as JSON it should give me the value I want. Let's test this out. Location, step through it. It's still complaining. It's complaining because, again, it's a property of undefined. So the issue is that I had an undefined value, and what I really want to do is pass an object to it. So let's change everything. So I'm actually creating an object that has the two keys of position and address. Let's try that approach and see if everybody's happier. Okay. Let's do a search. I'm going to do Paris. No, let's do something different. New London, Connecticut. It seems like a random thing, but I actually lived there as a child, so that's why I have that in there. Let's see what my loc results is. I've got my loc results, and it says, bum, 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 I have a position and an address, which is what I wanted. So let's let this play through, and you can see the output. We have the LatLng, and we have the address. So if you remember from the previous video, those are the two values or properties that we needed to create a marker. We needed a position, and we needed some sort of a title. So we're going to go with that. Let's try one more location. It worked properly in New York. And now let's bring our add location function back to life. And what we're going to do with add location, we're going to pass it in a location. And the location we're going to pass it in is this loc results object that we created. And then what we're going to do with this loc results object that we created, which is now called location, we're going to take we're going to destructure the location. So that should give us the LatLng, which is what the marker wants. And then we're going to take the title, and we're going to take the address the formatted address that we got back, and we're going to utilize that as the title for our marker. And as we covered in the last video, what we're doing is we're taking the existing array of markers, we're modifying the object so that it forces the map component to re-render, and we're going to add that new location that we just found to the array, which should then trigger the map to redraw itself, and then you should see whatever was the location you typed in appear on the map. And so what we're doing at the end here is we're taking our loc result, and we're passing our loc result value to add location. So let's try it. Let's search for something new. What are we going to search for? Silver. Nah, let's not do that. Let's try something else. Rockville, Maryland. Let's see what we got. So we found it, and it got on the map, but as you can see, the map did not adjust to show it. It placed it, but what we really want the map to do is kind of adjust its bounds so that any marker that is on the map is visible to the user as soon as you add it to the map. Let's try another location out of Virginia. As you can see, that's further out. So this kind of effort of us having to manually adjust the map size to see the markers is not what we want. So we're going to modify our component to be intelligent enough that when it redraws itself, to use a Google's map function called fitBounds, I think is the name of it, to iterate through all of the list of markers, identify what the appropriate boundary is, and then adjust the map to fit that boundary. So what we have here is inside of initializing the map, we're going to make sure that we fit all the markers. So we're adding this function. And then let's add our function called fitBounds. And as I said, that's going to take all the markers, it's going to iterate through all of them and calculate the appropriate bounds for the map and then set the map to that boundary. And Google does all the animation and everything for you, so all you have to do is do the calculation, set the map, and voila, it will just draw itself. We're utilizing another Google's map function, LatLng bounds. So we create the bounds, and then what we do is we iterate through all of our markers. We extend the bounds to include all of those markers. And then, as I said, Google will nicely adjust, figure out what the bound should be for us, and animate the map appropriately. So let's get my prop markers for each to loop through all of them. Then we call this function on the bounds extend. You pass in the location. So I'm sorry, not the location of position, which is a LatLng. So we create a new one. There's probably a more efficient way to do this and not constantly be recreating that, but this is what we got for now, so let's go with it. So now, as you can see, I'm looping through all of the bounds, and I am, sorry, not all the bounds, I'm looping through all the markers and extending my bounds for it, and then I take my map, and remember I need to dereference it to get the actual value, and I say fit bounds. Let's change the name so that my fit map bounds does not kind of get confused with the actual Google function. It's not really fit, it's calc. Calc sounds better. Let's do calc. Okay. We ran it, and it looks like I have some sort of error going on there. Let's try to debug and see what's going on. If I need to debug this, or can we figure out on our own? Yeah, it looks like the error is I'm not actually passing the bounds to the function. So we got that in there. We have our load map markers. We have our calculate map bounds after the map first gets launched. But the issue I think really is I don't want to do when the map's launched. I want to calculate my bounds whenever the markers are added to the map. So let's add the function calc map bounds to the function that loads the markers. So at the end of every time the markers are loaded, we'll call the function to calculate the bounds. And I think that's the safe place to put it. Let's move the calc map bounds function above, so it's defined beforehand. Let's kind of refresh this thing. Come on, let's do an empty cache hard reload. All right, so now we're at our starting point, our 2 items on the map. Everything is visible and fits. because we called fit. See, I added Maryland to it, and it added the marker, and the map adjusted its size appropriately to fit it. Let's add Rockville to the map. The map adjusted its size once again, which is lovely. And we're going to do one more, Ohio. So you see how it zoomed out and made sure that everything fit? That's what we wanted. And that, I think, kind of wraps up what we were trying to accomplish. I think this might be the last video in this series, unless I think of something else that I didn't cover that might be interesting to cover. A little comment here. Once again, called whenever new markers are added, and that's why I added the calc map bounds to the load markers function, right? Because otherwise what would happen is that I was only calculating the bounds when the map was initialized and not every time markers were changed, and that's really where we want it to be. I don't include it in this exercise, but when you remove items, you should see the same behavior. But once again, thanks for stopping by and checking out the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure you like and subscribe. Have any comments, please leave comments below. You have any suggestions, please leave suggestions below. Thanks, and have a good one. Bye.